Hey, friends, welcome to the End Evil podcast. This is Chris Jansen. Evil is the destruction of freedom. We're going to have a special episode tonight. I'm going to give people an opportunity to come on and join me in some conversation on misaligned worldviews. Tune in, check out this little video on misaligned worldviews, and then I'll open um, the possibility for people to jump on. The link, if you would like to join, is going to be in the chat, which will show up on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook on the live stream. All right, guys, see you there. Hey, friends, this is Chris Jansen. Evil is the destruction of freedom. Welcome to the End Evil podcast. Just wanted to draw your attention to a couple great things you can check out when you're done watching this show. Pop on over to Twitch and check out Brandon Spencer's 24-hour, 24/7 live stream coming at you with truth, freedom, natural law, all the time, every day. Also want to bring your attention to Mondays. You can check out my good friend Crypt Rick on Revolution Radio at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. And now, I have a great show for you. Thanks for joining me. Please stop on by to endevil.life and make a small donation or share something from the website. Subscribe to the channels and enjoy the show. Check out the chemtrails. Welcome to the End Evil podcast. This is Chris Jansen. Evil is the destruction of freedom. What does that mean? That means that we still got to talk about what evil means. That's what that means. Because it's not being recognized for what it is. It's being recognized for something other than what it is. Evil's being accepted as normal. It's being justified. It's being run through the paper mill of our society and our world, and repeated and repeated and repeated so many times that people forget what it is. So we have to be here reminding ourselves that, oh, we actually want a better future. We actually want to live in a world where we're all not like constantly screwing each other over and creating a situation where our children and grandchildren are getting raped by evil people, lizard people, whatever's going on behind the scenes. It might as well be lizard people the way they're acting. These psychotic folks that think that morality doesn't matter, that spirituality doesn't matter, and most of our society is pretty happy to just use the word spirituality only in the context of religions. That's because the jobs have been done to them, and sort of ultra focus their thinking into materialism, de facto Satanism, as Mark Passio describes it. I find that to be very true. Satanism is a newer term in history, but it describes selfishness that goes back in time, and every um, person that talks about spirituality and history understands the concept of selfishness versus the concept of selflessness, which obviously can go too far. So, all that being said, today I wanted to talk about belief structures of the mind and um, misaligned worldviews. Misaligned worldviews, belief structures, and thought patterns. Unhelpful and destructive thought patterns that continue to plague us and our world. Now, I have this page here of notes that I will show you guys. I'll take some pictures of it. And sometimes what I do is I take notes and notes, and then later when I get an opportunity to go through them, I put them in these plastic sleeves here. Kind of a nice way to organize. Um, hey, Marvin, if you're listening, one idea I thought of is we just basically start with a really simple book of the book, The End of All Evil, with just these, just print it out, and we could just kind of at least start by everybody having a copy of that, and then see what we can do to make a better version. The next version I thought about doing is sewing it. I was looking up some information on that. So you guys, I've got a conversation going with Marvin of Join the Internet about how to get the End of Evil book reprinted. And if anybody's interested in getting involved with that, please contact me, and I'll get you in contact with Marvin. We're going to try to create a team. On the Medieval Podcast, we do things like that because we care. So, misaligned worldviews and belief and thought patterns, negative, cyclical, unnecessary thought and belief patterns. I made a list here of actions that constitute religious belief. And I have a slide I'm going to try to find. If I can, I'll get it in here. If not, I'll share it with you folks later. That was from an earlier podcast I made, podcast presentation, my last presentation, about like really you can't really tell that much difference between religion and government if you were to look at it objectively. They use the same kind of accoutrements, the fancy buildings, the way they structure their meetings, the way they dress. Uh, it's hard to see when you're involved with it. You've already gotten used to it, and you think of it as a good thing, whether it's politics or our systems of control in the terms of law enforcement, right? Um, it's hard to look at it objectively when people are involved in it. They're inside the fish tank, and it's hard for them to look outside of the fish tank. So I wrote this list to help us kind of help people get out of that fish tank. At least those are willing and able and interested. And maybe you guys can learn how to say these things in a better way. But I just recently discovered this page of notes, and I happened to be wanting to talk about misaligned worldviews, and it was sort of like synchronistic that I came across this list. So, number one, repetitive, ritualistic habits done automatically, regardless of other factors. Let me read that again. Repetitive, ritualistic habits done automatically, regardless of other factors. Okay, number two, saying or repeating phrases or songs without conscious attention to the meaning or context. I just added the meaning or context, but again, what it said is saying or repeating phrases or songs without conscious attention. Number three, wearing outfits or decorations for the purpose of separating by class or authority. I'll read that again. Wearing outfits or decorations, or I like to call them costumes, for the purpose of separating by class or authority. And that might be or gender as well. Okay, well, we're on 1, 2, 3. I just got dots on my notes here and now I'm giving them numbers. Number 4, using symbols, combinations of symbols to garner attention, respect, or fear. I've seen in Mark Passio's work, he talks about sigils. I'm sure there's other people that describe what sigils are, but basically more complex versions of symbols that also might include letters and numbers. But, that's combinations of symbols. Trying to garner people's attention or respect or fear using the power of symbology or symbols, which also archetypes come into play there. Number 5, gathering in crowds using team spirit to confuse or amaze individuals to shock and awe, to shock or awe. Gathering in crowds using team spirit to confuse or amaze individuals, to shock or awe, to shock and awe these people. Um, Team spirit, I'm just using that term. Maybe you know a better term to describe this, and someone can help me with this one. But I'm talking about that fervor, that crowd fervor that builds when people gather together, and we call it mob mentality sometimes. But there's sort of this group excitement or spirit that you feel when you're in a congregation and people start getting all excited. It creates this. I'm going to call it team spirit. Anybody else has a term for that? Please share. Okay, number 6, displaying fake or contrived miracles to awe or mesmerize. Again, shocking people with some miracle. Displaying a fake or contrived miracle to shock, awe, or mesmerize. Number 7, trusting, using ancient text as truth, proven only by the age of the writing or the number of people in agreement to call it fact. So it's only fact because it's old, or a bunch of people believe it, or a bunch of people believe it and it's old, and somehow that gives it authority. And so people trust it or use it, call it truth, just because of these things, even though it hasn't been redeemed or corroborated in other ways. That's cherry picking truth, to put that simply. Number 8, claiming unique and a direct link to God. I read this list last night to Leslie Powers, and she had me add that one. I thought it was a very good point she made. So often in history that's been done. People are still doing that. These are actions that constitute religious beliefs. Claiming a unique and direct link to God, um, leveraging occulted knowledge, that's the big one. You know something other people don't know, and rather than just helping them with giving them the knowledge or sharing it with them, you instead leverage it to gain power over them. And last note here, I don't know if this is one of the bullet points, but it's a note on this. God does not need to impose authority. The will of creation is already fully inherent and present. So there you go. That's the ultimate thing there. So I'd love to encourage other people to join me in the conversation on these topics. I thought I'd just present them and then open the podcast if anyone wants to make comments or join me in a chat on these topics, and maybe we'll continue on a following week with another live roundtable on this topic. All right, thanks for listening, folks. Peace out.
Hey, what's up, friends? Yeah, thanks for checking that out. Looks like I got a couple awesome people joining me already here. Got Will and Brandon. What's up, guys? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you well. What's going on,
I'm
Will?
clear. What's up, my brothers? How you guys doing?
I just rebuilt my workstation for the third time in a few months, and it's a lot better, but right now it's kind of noisy with the fans on because it's hot as hell in here. So I'm going to try to keep myself muted. You guys just heard me talk for like 15 minutes, so I'm going to hand it right off. Will or Brandon, either of you guys want to start it off? I'd love to hear your point of view on what I just brought up. Thanks for coming, by the way. Appreciate it, guys.
I'll jump in. Hey, Leslie. Yeah, I think that the document, the points that the tenets that you put together, I think that was fantastic. I watched the Jones Plantation movie last night again for the second time and kind of really dove into the allegory. And it's a great movie. If people haven't seen it, check that out. But your tenets reminded me a lot of what they're in the movie, what they were revealing. And I always like to start with kind of the foundation of like what is alignment, right? The definition of alignment means to arrange in a line. So logically, what's the line? When we're looking at reality on the macro level, well, the line is truth, right? The independent objective truth, that which has manifested currently and in the past, it's natural law. So that's what it means to be in alignment. So of course, the social engineers having this profound depths of knowledge on the human psyche, they're going to utilize that. And those tenets that you brought forward is exactly the tool sets by which they utilize to control humanity's perception, because humanity is, ensconced in so much ignorance. They don't know what it means to be human. They don't know what nature is. They use words like God, meaning God, the word means to invoke, right? But they don't understand what that animating principle of the all is, right? So it's these, like the last concepts I just talked about, are foundational. Like, young kids can understand this when you communicate to them, because it is innate in our very being, our essence, our spirit, our soul. But yet, of course, being programmed and conditioned for many, many years, humanity in the aggregate has strayed from that so far that we are in negative knowledge, meaning that the inversion of what we think is going on in the world, how we think reality operates, is so far from what actually is the truth. Of course, many, many people are out of alignment, right? Not arranging to the truth, to first principles and objective morality and simply nature, which is all that. It's all encompassing. So, those were fantastic tenets.
Oh man, Will, you always just blow it out of the park. I love that alignment. A little bit of
Alignment.
combination of green language, and I'm sure there's etymological gold right there too as well.
Well,
And
you said
then
the last phrase, the last part of that was meant, which means
meant,
mind,
and I meant it.
and you meant it.
I minded
I
it.
love it.
And then innate, and then you were talking about nature, in nature, and then of course innate cap, of course, that's also what that means. No, just kidding. But let's pass it off to Brandon, and I'll turn off back my noisy fan here.
Chris, and I can understand, man, because it's hot here, and I got my fan blowing too. So just gonna sweat it out. But it is what it is. But yeah, a fantastic list. Some of the ones that kind of stuck out, to me was the gathering of the crowd, and I like the term the team spirit. And I, see this more as the collectivist mindset, or like the group think, something that we've seen all throughout, man's existence, and the negation of the individual, and how we have been conditioned to follow the crowd. And the crowd is extremely dangerous because it's unconscious and it is immoral. It doesn't have the capacity to discern free will. It doesn't have the capacity to use critical thinking. It doesn't have the capacity to discern truth and falsehood. And it doesn't have the capacity to discern, what's moral. And we see, when you gather in this crowd dynamic, people usually have the tendency to shirk personal responsibility and put it upon the group. So they'll say, well, someone else will stand up and do what's right, or someone else will, help would be responsible for me. And this is not the correct way of doing things, because in that group dynamic, it's easier to blend in, it's easier to be masked in. And we see this in the cult dynamic too, which a lot of these tenets you are talking about have been used in a lot of cults throughout history. Like you have the you have repetitive, you have ritualistic habits. Then you have the wearing of costumes, which was used in a lot of cults, and to get them to conform. And then two, claiming to be a direct or unique link to God. We see this. We've seen this so many times, and how people claim to be, reincarnated, or a second version of Christ, or insert your name here, or they claim to have this certain divine knowledge that only they have, and you can only get it through them. And we've just seen this time and time and time and time and time again, and it's very unfortunate because you can just see these patterns that keep popping up all throughout man's history of these same, like these same tenets that you have talked about, and these same things that Will have talked about, and some of these, main core things that most of us have been talking about, have been shouting, a hell about. And it's just sad because it's so easy to see, but the group dynamic is one that really stands out to me, because that's something that I see pretty much almost every day. Is people don't want to think for themselves, people don't want to be responsible, and they want to give that personal responsibility, over to an authority, or a religious figure, a politician, a priest, a partner, a corporation. And deep down, they don't really have the true self-love, the true self-worth, the, like the true self-care, to actually stand up and say, hey, I'm going to be responsible for, how I think. I'm going to be responsible for how I feel. I'm going to be responsible for how I behave. And I'm not going to let someone else do my thinking for me, because I'm going to have to pull myself out of my own problem and deal with my own trauma and fix my own problems, because no one's going to be coming, to save me. No one's going to be coming to rescue me. So it comes down to the individual, willing to stop compromising and step up and be that true leader. But you have to start from that internal basis, and some great points. Yeah, and yeah, I'll pass it on to Leslie.
Hey guys, really good points so far. And I want to just expand a little bit by starting out by highlighting some of the words and themes in those misaligned world views. Words like repetitive, ritualistic, repetitive, automatic, regardless of what's happening, regardless of truth, right? Again, repeating phrases without conscious attention, without context, purposefully dividing humans, creating a divisions of sort of like false teams. The divisions become teams that people create their identity from, right? That then continue division, right, between people based on myths or stories that again are help people feel good, but that aren't based in truth. Gathering in crowds, again, that whole group think pressure, using what would you call it, like what he says here, confuse, awe, shock, right? So you're basically manipulating people's perceptions and sensations and doing really some witchcraft, some trickery because if you can change how people feel, and then you're feeding them language or words that make them feel secure, or that prey upon, give them an answer to their fears, right? Then you're really putting people in somewhat of a trance. And then, that goes on with the fake miracles, claiming stories, right? Trusting, like just have faith, just follow the word. It doesn't matter about what you do. You just need to follow the word, right? There's an abdication of personal reflection, self-responsibility, because they want you to trust and believe in, right? There's distortions and that are being fed to people, that people are then sort of sacrificing their own consciousness, and their own thinking ability to fall into a kind of a mindless state, which is like a child's state. And this is sort of like preying upon people's desire to have a savior of some sort and to defer their responsibility to have a big mommy and a big daddy. So there's so much in here. And I just wanted to highlight those things for now. Chris.
Absolutely. Thanks, Leslie. I like that you brought up witchcraft and trickery and the trance aspect of it, because that is so real. I was getting a little distracted right towards the end of your, because CB in the chat was saying The second point made me think about all the hymns we'd sing in the church, just mindlessly sing the words and didn't have a clue what they meant or the origin. And she nailed it, because that's kind of, I was thinking about my years in church, and I was starting to type in the chat, like, we would go at church, like, everybody stand up, read the litany. And then you would be like, everlasting Father, Lord and Father, God. Everybody sit down. Okay. Somebody else read some shit. It's like, no one's like really, I mean, maybe some people are, but 99, it seems like the vast majority of people in those situations aren't really like, those aren't productive, active, current in the now type phrases that they're saying at all. And that was my experience even since a child, and it stuck in my head. It's like, what are these people doing? Anyway, I don't want to go on too much with my whole life story. Who are we on to? Will, you want to pop back in there?
Yeah, everyone has made fantastic points. I mean, this document is like the playbook, right? And what's interesting is that you could use the same playbook, but in the light, occult knowledge spectrum, right? There's going to be that opposite polarity where this could be utilized. So, context matters. What is the results? What is the action that is manifesting individually and collectively? So, and it also showcases, aspects of objective reality, meaning that there's certain things in a certain way that reality in nature operates. In this context, how to mind control the population and the individual and the population. So you could use the same type of knowledge on the opposite polarity to unfuck your mind and free your mind and program your mind in the positive moral right action spectrum for a positive outcome, right? So it's very telling, these tenets, and I think I highly recommend people sit with them and go through all of these. The repetitive ritualistic habits, I mean, they're all huge, right? But when we're talking about programming and conditioning, it has to be done repetitively. And when I think about, a big part of my work, obviously, is conscious parenting. Bam. If you take the perspective of a young child and now look at these tenets, you can see it all through culture and, through public schooling, the way parents operate with their kids, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, daycare, um, all this kind of stuff, right? I mean, all these tenets are there. And again, what is the context? What is the effect that it is doing to an individual? What is their behavior, the outcome? And obviously that is extremely important and telling and obvious.
Right, right. You know, we hear a lot of people today talking about I identify as this, or I identify as that. I identify as a Christian, or I identify with Black Lives Matter, that communist organization. But when you look at what the etymology of the word identity is, it just means the state of being the same. So when you take these labels on, and you take on, these identities, then what are you actually doing for the self? What are you doing for the individual? Because once you take on this identity that is shaped by social engineers, of course, like through repetition and mind control and through conditioning, then you take on all of the other things that come along with that identity. And then that's where that groupthink comes in. That's where that crowd mentality comes in, that cult mentality. Because the only thing that you should be identifying with is with the truth and morality and natural law, goodness, doing what's right, doing what's moral, doing what's just, not identifying, with these artificial, constructs that are there to shape our mind to, to build this artificial reality that has been, constructed. And Leslie had brought up like the shock and awe and like the witchcraft. That's kind of what how I was talking about with the whole dark magician when we did our one great work, warriors, in our last episode, and I was talking about how you know how when you use black magic, you can use the kind of shock and awe value to get people to fall in that subconscious or unconscious, help mindset to kind of get them to go along with your own evil hell agenda. Because if something is so shocking to the conscious mind, then the conscious mind will not be able to perceive it. So then therefore the subconscious is going to step in, then that's where that program is going to occur. Then you may go into fight, flight, or freeze. And I know Leslie has talked about this a lot in her work, and how many of us has. But that shock and awe value we've seen a lot. This is when in ancient time, how the king would take someone out in the middle of town and behead them in front of everyone else to cause fear, to get you to fall in line. And we still see that, today. You see all of these stories of people being executed, by these order followers to create this shock and this shock and awe, value. Deep, within ourselves, then that puts us into fear and it gets us to fall in line. You get that shock and awe, fear when you see those blue lights, pull up behind you because you're like, man, I hope they're not pulling me over, and it puts you in fear. So we have to break this fear condition. We have to break this shock and awe condition, because if not, we will always be victims to the mind control, to the dark hypnosis of the dark magicians. And then therefore, we will continue to operate on the unconscious level, and we will continue to create unconsciously. And that's what the group does. The group creates unconsciously. It's an unconscious creation because it's not being consciously perceived through the higher regions of the neocortex. The shock and awe value is going to keep you in that animalistic state, of fear. So, and just some really great points. And yeah, like Will said, this is a good playbook, to describe how humanity has been conditioned for eons, because these things work. These things work, sadly, and most people don't want to learn about them.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when I came up with the idea to start this list, Brandon. I was trying to remember which presentation it was. One of the presentations I put together, I showed some pictures of government buildings and then pictures of the inside of religious institutions like churches. What's up, Chris? Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you're here, man. We got so many brilliant minds here that Restream is like doesn't know what to do with it. It's like shutting down on the inside. But the point I was making is that I was trying to compare like some of the similarities to try to point out to people like I grew up going to churches. I spent a lot of my life inside of churches. And I've met a lot of other people that in a similar way spent more of their life like in political spectrums. Maybe their mother was a politician. And then other people that have lived in like families that were police officers and military, and you're kind of used to it. It all seems normal, right? And so I was looking for a way to try to draw some parallels to help people see like these things are very much the same. And that's where this list came from, is thinking about the things that were the same between government and religion, and cultural religions and school. Come to think of it, they have a lot of these same things too. But we got Marvin with us too. Chris, you're up next. Thanks for joining us. Love to hear what you got to say on the topic.
Oh, hey, yeah, I just got home from doing some shopping, picking up the family that was hanging out with other people. So misaligned worldview, I haven't heard much of what anyone's saying. So I don't know. Let's see. Misaligned worldviews that are not in alignment, in disequilibrium. So what could that mean? Not in equilibrium with reality, with truth, obviously moral truth, the most important thing to be in alignment with, and the worldviews that result from that misalignment is a worldview, I guess that's poison worldview, and that means it's going to affect your behavior because the mind leads to what our behaviors do. And that's the world we live in, is a world of misaligned worldviews where everyone's internal reality reflects outwards and creates that external reality that is the support of domination and the predator mindset and the support of their own enslavement and the enslavement of everyone else. I'll just stop there since someone else can go and fill in some holes, and I'll bounce off of that.
And on it goes. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for joining us. Let's pass it on to Marvin. You got
Hey,
your audio working there?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming in. Coming
Okay,
in
cool.
clear. Thanks for coming, brother.
Yeah, no, I was really happy and excited to see this live. So I set up my stuff. I didn't have it set up, and I was working on other stuff, but this is worth switching over for sure. So I have this. What do you call these? The list, the misaligned worldviews, on another screen here. And to be honest, I think I'm gonna need to like study this on my own time. But it's a cool list: repetitive, ritualistic habits done automatically, regardless of other factors or extenuating circumstances. Like, yeah, why would you keep doing that, right? Like, clearly, man, I'm so curious to like hear what has people actually behave like that, but that's a whole nother topic. Saying or repeating phrases or songs or written material without conscious attention to meaning and context and the moment we are existing in reality. I wanted to ask you about this one, Chris. Is this your list, by the way? Is this like, did you write? Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and well, before
yeah,
that, I want to say it came very synchronistically too. I had written like on the wall. It's actually this piece of wood right here in Sharpie.
nice.
Misaligned worldviews. I had like a little brainstorm one day, and then while I was moving things around, restructuring my desk situation, I came across that note where I'd written that, and it was just like, that's what I'm looking for. That's this week's show. So sorry about that.
Interesting. No, that's cool. And I like lists like this because they help frame a topic like you guys are talking about. So I wonder what this looks like. This one though, saying or repeating phrases or songs or written material without conscious attention to meaning. Because this one sounds a little like me, maybe.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Oh wow, yeah.
Think about culture,
That's really
pop
good.
songs, Swifties.
Yeah. Oh
You
my
know, I
gosh, that's
mean,
so interesting.
they're
Okay.
spelling
Yep.
magic, dark magic.
Okay. Yeah, without thinking about like, what are these words I'm saying and how come I'm saying that? Oh my gosh, that's like all of us, or at least me when I was a kid for sure, and for a very long time, to be honest with you. Okay, I get it now. Yeah, this is a pretty cool list, man. So you just found this, you said? Like you were going through a like
Yeah, I don't know how long ago. It's probably a few years ago when I wrote it, and I just popped across it, and I was like, "Oh, this is perfect." And I had, like I said, just been thinking about that topic. I'm like, "This is what I was talking about." I already
real
made a
cool.
list on this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely be studying this after this call. I wanted to share the misaligned worldview that I can kind of see in just as I approach life and being parts of different groups and things like that. And as it comes to the topic of natural law, for example, I'm new to this whole topic. So if I show ignorance or nescience, educate me or help me educate myself. But I noticed like there's a challenge with defining natural law itself, and even things like rights. Um, so as far as misaligned worldviews, and then a group of people like us who believe in freedom in the spiritual and other senses of the word, maybe that becomes a thing to help people get into some sort of congruence with, because otherwise I've noticed groups like ours or people in general can do a lot of talking and not a lot of educating. So that might be a lot. So let me know if that doesn't make sense or if I can clarify anything. But that's one thing I wanted to contribute, because some of this stuff might be simpler to like put on a list than it seems. Kind of like you did here. Like I just asked a few questions, and then once I understood better, yeah, these make a lot of sense to me actually. So it's really cool.
Yeah, like Will always says, simplify the profound. And
Yeah.
just him
Wow.
saying
Yeah.
that I apply it to a lot of other aspects of my life as well. So it's like all of us doing this work and exercising our rhetoric, we're helping each other exercise and strengthening all of our word, mind, mentality, and muscles, so we can have a more clarity when we look at the world instead of having it obscured by perceptions. Is exactly what we're talking about. Anybody else want to wrap on that next?
Yeah, I have a few things. I wanted to just highlight that consciousness occurs in the present moment, and that it is through self-awareness and orientation to our time and place, right, in the presence, in reality, that we have our conscious, where we can be in consciousness. So that involves maintaining awareness of ourself, right, and surroundings, and knowing thyself. And that includes knowing your vulnerabilities, knowing what can be exploited, And so, for example, are you vulnerable because you really want security and to feel safe? Are you really vulnerable because you want to feel important and special, or feel connection, interconnection? And so these religious type of institutions, whether it's the government and your political party, or an actual religion or group of some sort that gets you hooked in, because underneath it is a fear, that. And so if you don't really know yourself and you're not committed to staying oriented in the present, then you are vulnerable to being pulled into this kind of mind control sorcery and into a trance in a way. And you can think of childhood games like Follow the Leader, the game of everybody follow the leader, or Tag, You're It, right? Or what's the other one? Simon Says. There's either like this gang attack on somebody, or there's a following blindly. You're out if you act without Simon saying, right? So there's this programming going on that basically is training children into this outward focus of following the leader, which then is perpetuated in our political system and our religious systems, etc. So there can be also like distractors in people's tone, watch kind of these evangelist preachers, and people get hyped up. They get caught up in the hype of it, in the feeling state, in the energy that comes from large numbers of people kind of cheering and connecting their energy. And that energy is, exploited. And people become unconscious in the waves. Like that's when, people, how many times are there like stampedes and trampling of people? People just lose their minds. So that's were some of the thoughts I had. And I wanted to I had a thought earlier today that's kind of relevant. And this was the thought is that it's like there's Satanists versus light workers, in a sense, was my thought. And if you're not on the light worker team, if you're not conscious of standing, and stepping in the direction of truth and conscious awareness and morality, then you are by default helping the Satanists. You are helping the dark forces that are really taking energy from you and controlling a lot of your actions unconsciously. So beware.
Yeah, I like the point about the being in the present moment, and that is consciousness, because what that also supports is the fact that we have a choice. Like every moment is a choice, and that's just something to note, because like you said, that passive behavior that you described, I think it boils down to willful ignorance of that choice's existence. And obviously modifying that is easier said than done, because people are resistant to that knowledge, hence ignorance. But yeah, it's a good thing to drill into, in my opinion.
I was
Go
going
ahead,
to
sorry.
say, I think it would be helpful to actually bring more examples, concrete examples of some of these points, like repetitive ritualistic habits done automatically, regardless of
Mm,
extenuating circumstances. How about
mhm.
voting? All this voting corruption has been, very clear. And it's rather ridiculous to really think that your vote is like determining where, or your taxes are being, used for good things, right? But people automatically just get in the program and do it, right? That's an example. What other examples do you guys have?
Yeah, one popped into my head. Um, when I worked at the court, it really just struck me, especially. But I've heard different people talk about it. It's like this dark occult thing with the judges wearing the black robes, and then the
Oh yeah.
costumes that the cops wear. Obviously, military. The higher you are up in the military, the more little deals you got, little pins. You got your bling, right? What was that movie when you had to have 27 pieces of bling on your? Uh, it's
Office
like,
Space.
right. I think that's one of the funniest thing is the costumes and the outfits and the decorations that intimidate, because there's so many good examples of that, even in school too. Like, when you're at the graduation, like everybody's got to dress up and wear those costumes again, and they're very symbolic costumes. And we've looked into some of that with the hexagram and the tesseract and all that, and the 4D cube. I've talked about that, but and that symbol is in a lot of these clothes that they wear, and people don't even realize the archetypes that they're representing are archetypes of control by people that are controlling them. And if they knew that, it'd be embarrassing. And I think that's partly why it's hard to realize that, because you're, like I said, you're looking from the inside. But anybody else got any other good examples?
Can I throw one in there just real quick? It's broad, but hopefully that's okay. Just lying in general. Maybe that's let me see. Where does that fit on the list? I can think of a way indirectly,
Claiming
but just
claiming
lying in general.
stories to be true that are impossible to
Mm-hmm,
corroborate.
mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's
Pretending
perfect.
you
Okay.
have the direct
Perfect.
link to some spiritual being, and that you're the only one trusted with that information.
Yes. I
Yeah.
know people like that. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's not funny,
I,
but
w-
funny.
I wanted to share something on the dress and costume, even subtle things like white collar dress code, blue collar dress. I was at a job once where I was told to go home and change my clothes, because I was a full grown adult doing professional work, right? Or like, and I even at this point, there's sort of an expectation that as a professional, I have to dress a certain way. And a big part of me just wants to defy that rule, because that's not the basis of judging my role at what I do, and I don't really need to have this separation or to be seen necessarily as this being that is all knowing, or, an authority, right?
One that I want to talk about was the holidays. The repetitive, ritualistic, habits that we all conditioned. We just had Father's Day pass, and you see majority of the people, just going out and spending money, or going out to eat, thinking that one particular day means more than all the other days. And I don't celebrate any of these days, but I know a lot of people do. But it's just the mindset and the repetition. It is like a ritual, because people, will do certain things at a certain time of the year, and only at that time of year, and it's repetition. And they'll condition their children to get involved, and then they'll get other people to get involved in these group um, you know in these group rituals. So that's one. And then for the second one, saying or repeating certain phrases of songs. Man, I've been hearing this for many, many years on the softball field, because I'm around kids, and I just see how they'll just be, singing songs, and it was one instance where I recognized the lyrics in a song, because when I listen to music, I would always go look up the lyrics, because I was always, interested in lyrics. But I remember this. this one little girl, she was singing a song and she was saying like, like Klonopins and, like all these pills. And I asked her, I said, do you know exactly what those were? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh man, that's really bad. And then a lot of the parents will be playing music, like at these tournaments. And I'll go up to the parents. I'm like, do y'all actually go and look up the lyrics to these songs? And every time they're like, no. And I'm like, hey, like these lyrics are conditioning these kids. And we as parents should be filtering out and vetting out these wrong, like these wrong dangerous lyrics, because a child's mind should not be listening to certain lyrics. So that's something that that I've seen many times throughout my umpiring career, and sadly, it's like the parents just seem to not care, and I'm the one person who doesn't have kids, and I'm the one who does care, and I'm like, we need to be paying more conscious awareness to like the environment we raised our kids in. And, and I know this is something that Will's been hammering about for years and years and years, and he's going to keep hammering on about it because it is an important thing. The environment that we raise our kids in is tremendously important, and these songs and the entertainment and everything that we put in front of our kids has value, and it can also have detriment too. So yeah, just something that I wanted to bring about, because the lyrics, man, that
Well,
grammar.
I'm glad you brought up the holiday thing. Just was it like 2 days ago, Leslie and I were talking about holidays because we were trying to figure out what Juneteenth was. I didn't even. I just
Another
noticed
I
it
fake
knew
ass
it.
recently.
holiday.
Which,
Just
actually, the history of that one, a lot more than others, we might want to actually celebrate some aspects because it's about this like fighting for freedom thing a little bit. But um, what I was thinking about was when I worked for the court or when I worked for the government. Those are the people that reap the most benefit from government holidays. And those are the regular, most ritualistic days, and they celebrate all of them, like Columbus Day, which is this guy's like a mass murderer, racist, you know, who did nothing good. He was a pretty evil person from what I've gathered. Not a day to really celebrate at all. What are we celebrating? Imperialism? Like, and anyway, it's just we were kind of talking about, thinking about it. A lot of times the people who are collecting tax money and benefiting off of the robbery that's happening to all of us are the same ones that are benefiting from all these holidays. The rest of the poor Joes, a lot of us got to work on those days because we can't afford to take the day off because we're not getting a fat government paycheck and we don't have, all this retirement money built up, So it's kind of like a double trick in that. But yeah, I'll hand it on. Who wants to jump in next?
Isn't there like evidence that the music industry has on purpose implemented certain messages and things like that for certain names? And aren't there ties to like the prison complex, like an actual connection between promoting things like crime and drugs and violence and then actual crimes? I
Yeah.
made a note to myself to do research on that already, but isn't there actual like evidence of things like that? That would corroborate what Brandon's saying for sure. So
Yeah, especially in like the I want to say like the early '90s in the rap, when like Easy E and all that, like the whole gangster rap, was coming up, because this was when, like the black culture was just getting out of, like the drugs from the CIA, and then a lot of the dads, were put in prison for out through drugs, or like the whole pimp culture. Like the whole pimp culture is something that a lot of people don't talk about from the '70s and '80s in the black exploitation films. So then you had the crack and the CIA. So then in the '90s you had like the whole gangster rap, because you had a lot of young men being brought about without a strong parental male father figure, so they would look toward the gang, or like the gangster rap as pretty much as that family unit. And we all know what pretty much happened after that. It just led to more disruption of the family. The derogatory and demoralization of women. Like calling women, named and stuff like that. It led to the breakup of relationships, the breakup of families, and of course, more young men in jail, and of course, more kids being raised without strong male father figures.
Yeah, now there's all kinds of stuff that has come out and continues to come out that just proves that entire industry is pure smoke and mirrors, which people already know. Like everybody knows that, like Hollywood is fake and all of that stuff, blah blah blah. But I don't know if people truly understand how much of an illusion all of that stuff is, because people are still influenced by messaging and visuals. And I guess that can be a good and a bad thing. So I always say, but in this case, like in the examples you're talking about, those are clearly immoral. So it latches onto the just general topic of like that bystander effect that I'm hearing here, because these are like behaviors that people seem to have, that people who have a keen understanding of psychology can just take advantage of, like believing lies or not looking into things further. That's been a big one. That's one of the things that got me into this whole darn topic, because I'll try to share a story here real quick if that's cool. You know that Maui fire? You know how they said with the Maui fire, like that, how they didn't turn a siren on that would have warned people about a fire? Like, do you guys remember all of that? That was like the official story. Do you remember why? Do you know why they said they didn't turn on that siren? Like, do you recall that? Have you looked into that? This was like the official story. I'll tell you, it's okay. They said they didn't turn it on because it's really a tsunami siren. So if they had turned that siren on, people would have gone inland, which then would have directed them to the fire. And yet, nobody I know would say, "Oh, well, good. I don't want them to turn the siren on then if there's a freaking fire, because I'm too stupid to not walk into a fire." Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I had friends like share that story with me, and so just immediately that sounded weird, and I was like, "Huh, that seems weird. Let me look into that." And so I looked into what the siren even is, and it's literally like, you can go on the government website. It's an all hazard siren. So it's literally meant to be sirens that are rung for any type of hazard: tsunami, fire, alien invasion, whatever. And so that just seemed really odd to me. And just the fact that my own friends, my own family are just kind of parroting the official line, even though a little bit of critical thinking, like you just go 2 layers in and it doesn't make any sense. It just really annoyed me, actually. So, and it is a behavior that people seem to have. Like, they will just trust something at face value. It's like, I don't have the listener in front of me anymore, Chris, but I'll just call it the "just trust me" clause. Because I mean, that is what it is. People have a hard time saying no. Um, they will believe things at face value. They won't look into things further, and they'll bucket things like that under, "Oh, well, they don't want to, be annoying or be impolite or something like that."
Well, that's the degenerated mind that we've all been conditioned into,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
being unthinking, uncritical, and that's like the whatever was being read before about unexamined unexamined thought forms, and that's why like Socrates or whatever, an unexamined life is not worth living, because if you don't engage in self-reflection and analyzing the things that you've been conditioned with, then you're not going to know how you're living your life is actually true or right, because that's what we all strive for. No one wants to be wrong. And just on a side note, I'll get back to this, but Mr. Host Chris mentioned the Crying Mary statues here in the chat, and it's ridiculous that there's all these events, and one of them is funny if you look into it. I don't remember where, but so the statue was bleeding or whatever, right? So they started collecting the water and then they were drinking it, and it turns out that the water that was coming out of the statue was because like it was on like a terraced area, and it was due to like a leaking sewer, leaking septic tank or something. So people were drinking like sewer, like really like toxic sewer water, and they thought it was holy, because like it doesn't matter what the reality is, all that matters
Oh
is
man,
belief.
This
And
is
this is
good
what I
shit right
realized.
here.
Yeah, it's good shit. It's gonna
holy
make you
toilet
healthy.
water.
That's something I
Oh
realized before I
no.
even got into Passio and
That
the
holy shit.
conspiracy stuff.
Yeah.
That I realized that people will just believe whatever they want, and that's
Mm.
the way that we have been conditioned into. And so whatever the authority is, whether it's the government or whoever's popular, that's why celebrities, like, who gives a shit what a celebrity says? But apparently a lot of people do, even though they're not an actual authority on anything, they're just popular. So either you're popular, you're on the popularity bandwagon, you jump on that wagon and you go where other people are going, and go with the flow, join the crowd, or there's authorities and experts in whatever field that you can imagine. Well, those are the experts, so don't think about it yourself. Everyone's in their own silo, in their own compartmentalized uh, aspect of knowledge that they can speak about. So the geologist, well, he talks about geology, but he doesn't talk about archaeology. An archaeologist and the geologist, well, they don't talk about medicine. They just follow what the medicine authority says. So everyone's an authority in their specific field, and that's what the education system has inculcated into the mindset, is to, you specialize in your field and then you trust other people in your field. So all it is a big deception trust game. It's a con game where everyone's just trusting everyone else, and that's the world we live in. And unfortunately, that's the trust aspect is something we have to live with, because we can't verify everything. So we trust in the general goodwill of people, or the consequences that can be applied to them if they don't do their jobs right. Say, like an elevator. Well, did you verify the cables in the elevator when you got into it? Did you verify the mechanics? No, but you trust that the elevator is not going to crash and kill you, because someone's supposed to do the maintenance and upkeep it. But shit happens, and sometimes, the elevator goes bad and people die. It's rare, but there's a lot of things, and everyone's surrounded by trust. And so trust is something that's ingrained as in our social coherence as a society, and we're not considering the ramifications of the trust um, that we give towards others, and so many other areas where we can do our own thinking. So some things that, it's like, are we going to verify everything? We're going to verify the cables and the electronics everywhere we go in the elevator. We're just going to take the stairs because we can't verify it. Okay, you'll get a lot of exercise, but you'll probably be tiring, and it takes a lot of time to go up places when you're just going to use the stairs. And the building, did you verify the architecture? Is it actually architecturally sound in the physics of the construction? No, so we trust that it was, and that there were inspectors that inspected it. And there's buildings that are built on subpar concrete, where they try to cut corners and save money, so they try to build buildings in an inferior way, and then eventually down the line there's a collapse, and then they say, like, oh, well, look, the concrete wasn't done properly. And then there's all these things. So there's so much trust in everything that we put in all of our lives, and in some ways we can't verify it all, and we do have to trust implicitly. And it'd be better if we hope that there's a consequences for people who try to screw other people over and misuse and abuse the trust. But in a lot of areas, it's just laziness and being conditioned into just accepting what authorities and experts say, rather than just say, well, is this true? Why is it true? And about the traditions, like, that's something that Brandon brought up that I was thinking too. It's like we're conditioned into everything, and we just do it because, well, that's the way it's been done. So this is your birthday, and this is a special day, so you got to celebrate, and then you got to give gifts. So when it's someone else's birthday, you got to give them gifts. Well, why? You could give a gift on any other day. Oh, but then when it's the birthday, if you don't give a gift, then some person will become upset because they didn't get a gift on their birthday. But you could do something on another day. Why? What's the significance about specifically doing it on that day, and all the holidays and everything? And there's just so much conditioning into how to behave. And I guess I'll stop there.
May I chime in on that? Okay, cool. Because CB, thanks for summarizing that point. Well, I got the same thing. It is hard to draw like the line on what to verify. That is true, and I like the elevator example, because that is an area where you have to trust that, like, you're not going to get screwed, and the elevator will work and take you to the next level. I think there's a difference between trusting something like the elevator working, though, and when the government is saying the president isn't a zombie, because, like, they're asking us not to trust our senses, you know what I mean? Or, I think I'm kind of realizing that the difference might be that the types of things that are good to verify typically are favored towards another person financially when they're asking us not to verify. I need to try that again. But for example, oh yeah, our currency is real, and then they figure out ways to just siphon it over to themselves, and then they tell you, oh, don't worry, it's too complex for you, so just trust that we know what we're doing. Like there's so much that entity now gains from you believing that, and that is just so much different. Like why would somebody purposely screw an elevator unless they're just jerks, to put it lightly, you know? So maybe that helps too, know where to draw the line a little bit, because it's a good point. So just wanted to add that in.
Oh, just 1 minute. The elevators is because the cables can become frayed, and if they're not
Mm-hmm.
inspected, then they can become more frayed, and then eventually they're just going to break, and then that's when you have accidents. Or
True,
like a brake pad on a car, there's brake pads on the elevators in those emergencies, and if they're not, if they're so there's always this implicit
Yep.
trust, and of course in government, there's things before your eyes, and you see things happen, and they're like, no, don't trust your eyes, don't trust your ears, just we're the
Yep.
authority, so
Yep.
just
Yep.
accept what we say.
Cool.
and that is part of the argument that statists will state, is that they think, oh well, that's why we need the state, that's why we need laws, the government, to enforce rules and regulations so that people keep up the elevators and the roads or whatever, but we can see obviously so many cases where those things haven't been done properly up to par. And but there is a certain trust, like you're saying, that we have. And I think it's a good question was asking in the chat, and that's kind of what Martin's beginning to explore. How do we discern then? But I thought this is really good, because the one line I put was trusting or using ancient as a means of authentication. And that's really common. It's a logical fallacy. I don't know how many people in the modern vernacular know what I'm talking about when I'm saying logical fallacy, but it is a logical fallacy to think something's true just because a lot of other people think it be true, or just because it seems like it's been true for a long time and not enough people have argued with it. That does not make it true. And so those are fallacies in thinking. And so I think it's hard. We have to like break down so many aspects of our society and our lifestyle to kind of figure out which things am I being too trusting with, and which things are okay for now, and which things do we want to change as soon as possible, etc. And that's kind of like why we have to have these convos and keep this thing going. It's not a conversation that most people out there are having, and we're trying to encourage more of this type of thing. So thanks, you guys who are all here, for coming and discussing this. Anybody else want to jump in next and add to this convo?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Chris and Marvin, you guys were bringing up some really good points. And I want to comment to what you guys were saying, right? Because I totally agree. And this is why present moment awareness is important, right? Like Leslie said earlier, consciousness is about the now, your awareness of your internal ecology and what's going on in your environment, your local environment, and even I would add the big picture as well. And I think, well, I'll say this first. The majority of people don't do that, right? I mean, I'm analyzing, and I don't want this to sound like I'm like overly analytical. I'm very aware of everything that I'm doing, right? If I'm walking down the street, I'm like analyzing everything around me. It's almost, second nature at this point. I'm not like super hyper focused on every single person going by, but I know if something is out of place, it's a red flag. Just as if you were to get into an Uber and you can tell the guy is like, okay, taking you to your destination looking drunk or something, right? Most people don't have this present moment awareness. Same thing with the elevator. If you get into the elevator and it acts funny, then you might want to hop off and say, I'll take the stairs or something like that. So there's that fine balance. And of course, awareness is pattern recognition. So when you think of something like government, how many times does the patterns have to show that it's based in coercion, violence, lies, deception, and before people pick up on it? But they don't. they don't pick up on this pattern recognition because they're at a low level of awareness. They don't have that balance or symbiosis of consciousness to recognize the patterns. And that goes within their own daily lives and within their own internal environment on what their triggers are, how they're responding to or reacting to certain situations. And then another comment on the what you were saying, Chris, about the trusting the ancient texts or means of authority or popularity. I mean, there's so many we can go through. The cultural religions is one of the most obvious, but also the Constitution for in America, right? How many mainly right-leaning people think that our rights are derived from the Constitution, that the Constitution granted us our rights. Which is totally BS. Our rights are inherent due to our existence from nature. So there's so many. I stepped away for a bit, so I don't know what you guys touched on for the earlier ones, but I'll leave it there. This is good. This whole document has my wheels turning.
Oh,
Uh, from the time you wake up, there's always something or someone that's trying to steal your hell awareness, your focus, and hell attention. Like literally, from the time you wake up, so when you step outside, there's always, someone, a corporation, government trying to steal your hell awareness, your focus, your, hell attention. So that's why you have to be present. You have to be, present in the now. And one thing that I like to do is because I am very conscientious, especially if I am around large groups of people. And this is important because that way you don't fall into that group dynamic. You have to be aware of how you think, how you feel, and how you are behaving at all times of the day, especially in public. In today's day and age, with all the glitz and glamour, with all, how the shiny things, with everyone looking down, at their phone. And one thing that I wanted to bring up is imagery is very powerful. It is extremely powerful. And I want to say the ancient priest class always knew this, and we hear, the story of the graven image in the Bible. Well, what is a image? It is a representation of someone or something in reality, so I'm sure y'all remember in the early 2000s, like we had the term "a picture is worth 1,000 words." Well, it's more than that. It's worth 1,000 ideas in your mind because that imagery will create concepts and all of these thought forms and all of these thought patterns within your mind, and then therefore, those thought forms and those thought patterns will start to create, like more concepts and abstractions. So the imagery is what is used a lot of the time to bypass, our conscious mind. That way, how the sorcerers are, the social engineers can steer our mindsets toward, however way, how they see fit. And we see this in, like in today is everyone has their symbol, everyone has their imagery, and they have it posted right in front of your face. You can't go anywhere, without seeing a corporation, a logo, or a image. You even see the celebrities, they have to keep their image up, because it's all about looking good. It's all about the aesthetics. It's all about, it's all about the glitz and glamour. It's all about, the facade, the makeup. It's all about the look. It's not about the internal. It's all about the external. Therefore, to get you to bypass that truly logical, conscious awareness and to tap into that lower base emotional, how can they get you to get an emotional reaction with that image? Then therefore they can sell you that idea or sell you that product or sell you whatever you don't really need. So yeah, imagery has always been powerful throughout,
Yeah.
mankind's.
Such good points. I've kind of want to bounce off a few things that you guys have said. So one that you just mentioned, Brandon, is this idea of celebrities and their image. And I happened to just for kind of like shits and giggles and curiosity, watch this silly little video about it was by a plastic surgeon who was analyzing Madonna's face over the decades to determine approximately how many plastic surgeries she's had. And he could pretty much feel very confident, but at least like 38 surgeries, and possibly more. I think it might have even been more than that. It was like to me, it was like a really high number. And, and you can look at celebrities and you can see where they've just gone too far and their faces are like malformed. But the thing is that this is setting a standard for, women, especially, of feeling, like they need to step up to this standard that's false, that's really a facade and a lie about what is beauty, feeling uncomfortable with aging naturally, and this ageism, that's really very prevalent in our society. So there's all of this in it. And this is like driving you subconsciously, and bringing you to spend lots of money and obsess over things that aren't important, really. And so there's this automatic thinking that goes on. And when we talk about like, okay, being conscious and being conscious in the present, how aware are you of your own thoughts that you're thinking at any given moment? How often in a day do you lose time, where you're like, oh shit, what was I just thinking about? I just lost like 20 minutes scrolling, or like lost in my own head and ruminating and worrying, driving hypnosis, having songs stuck in your head. I think many people are living very unconsciously with these repetitive things that are coming up from the subconscious. They're not controlling it, and then they don't know how to control those mental processes when they get out of control. So when something happens, a false flag event, a scamdemic, it then hijacks the mind because they're sleeping. And they're in this automatic subconscious state, and then it hijacks that and amplifies it. And so now we have, like multiplied anxiety disorders and people who are feeling out of control of their own, daily thinking, okay, and feeling states. So there's that. And then I was thinking about the holiday thing, and the example that came to my mind was like St. Patty's Day, and how, people are just automatically going through a ritualized celebration that without even really knowing the truth about what the creation of that holiday was, and that this St. Patrick wasn't really a good guy, but people like green beer and they like an excuse to go out and eat and drink a lot and get rowdy. And, and so then you add the whole element of substance abuse, of alcohol, of, social, like you were saying, Brandon, about going out in social events, that there is a need to be vigilant and to be careful what energy you're around, what places you are at. I've dated musicians, and I've been in bars, and I've seen bar fights break out and ridiculous behaviors, and people punch each other in the nose, and it's like craziness, right? And so that's part of one of the outcomes, I think, of this unconscious sort of these tricks that are Chris talked about. And that's leveraging occulted knowledge. That's like doing these, if you think about marketing, even in basic like sales, if you want to go on the most simple level, not look at the whole deeper levels of the dark occultist, kind of mind control, it's leveraging people's unconscious. So there's a naivete here, and the biggest naivete is trusting the government. It's trusting that these people you're voting for are actually looking out for your best interests, trusting your doctors. There's a naivete and this actual like childlike mindset, and there's an underestimation of the impact, of the evil in the world, of the existence of mind control, of the trauma-based aspects of mind control. The movie industry, you can look at like Mark Devlin's work And you can see a lot of that mind control going on in the music industry, and understand the intentions behind it and how it's hooking people in very devious ways. I wanted to mention about what are some of our skills that we can use. Is that Marvin? You mentioned intuition, right? Using your own senses, learning to trust yourself, that what you see, feel, hear, taste, smell is real, right? And not this like magical kind of like fairy dust that's being, put in front of you to manipulate your emotion and get you to think something else is real when it's really not. We need to use our critical thinking. We need to keep our brain in balance with the right and left hemispheres, and at all times, which means we need to learn to regulate and manage our emotions so that they don't hijack us, away from our frontal lobes and our ability to think and reason. And so this whole like emotional intelligence and the development of skills around self-regulation are really important. And the idea of reputation being more powerful than a title, your behavior, your alignment. Do people's thoughts, feelings, and actions align? Do they do what they say? Do they say what they do? Does that occur over time? There's like data, real life data and observation. And that's, again, looking at what's real and not what's the fantasy or the desire or expectation in your head. So when we look at, social environment, we have this need, like Chris, you were saying, this kind of catch-22 around, we have to trust at some point. Otherwise, you end up like agoraphobic and in your house and afraid to go anywhere. And unfortunately, there's way too many people that actually are like that. They are afraid to go in the grocery store. They feel unsafe walking down the street. Many, many people. And so there's a complete loss of trust within your own core that's missing. And when you don't trust your own ability to think and observe and come to logical conclusions through the trivium process and learn what intuition is, then you're at the mercy of something external to you. And there's an emotional need to attach to that which makes you feel safe. And that doesn't mean you are safe. So how do you determine trust? Well, I think it ultimately comes down to natural law, because if I'm going to put my trust in someone, I want to make sure that person really understands what natural law is and understands what human rights are, and that they're committed to that, to the truth and to what's right. And if a person shows over time that they are committed to that, then they are building up trustworthiness, and that will express in their reputation in the social world. And so I think that we need to kind of eliminate this idea of looking at experts with letters behind their name or a certain degree. I mean, a lot of these, I hear lots of stories. I talk to a lot of people, and I'm hearing a lot of stories about like surgeons on your that are like doing surgery on your body that are also out doing some pretty immoral things, out taking ketamine in the clubs and drinking a lot. And, like there's stories I'm hearing that are really like putting me in doubt about trusting. Okay. And I think that this whole idea of what is trust, how do you determine trustworthiness, is an important topic. So great one, Chris.
Yeah, there's a lot there. All aspects of society, all these ways that we've been fractionalized, and I think the deeper layer of these belief systems are what kind of set the soil. It's like poison in the soil for the plants to not grow, and for all these same problems that keep popping up instead of the plants that we want. So we got about 5-10 minutes left before I want to end the show for today. Let's just kind of any solution-oriented advice for the audience, I'd appreciate to hear at this point. Anybody want to jump in with what can people do about these misaligned worldviews. And I don't know if we can do anything about the misaligned face views with the Madonna and those people. They're misaligned, but we can
That's
do
funny.
something about the messages they're putting up and how we receive them. And my biggest advice before I hand it off is turn off the fucking television. All right, who else? Who's got some ideas?
I'll throw something in and tie it to CB's question. He asked, "What have y'all done to help self-regulate your emotions?" And one thing is, I think of it as I don't self-regulate my emotions necessarily because I can't do that. I'll have the emotions that I have. It's like an automated thing that just happens. Like I can't really control that element, but I can choose what to do from there. So the thing that I will throw into that one is that I uh, take my time to think. And then I think about something from as many angles as I can, from the outside out, inside out, and the outside in, from the perspective of like, is there something I might have done here? If not, what else could it be? So it like ends up being this little thing. And it's okay to take your time. People like feel a pressure. I even can like, if you're trying to get off an airplane after a trip, for example, you feel that rush, like just as an example. But actually, if you can learn to take your time, because people are cool, you'll actually have a lot more freedom within that than it might seem. That's one thing that I've learned. So I'll shut up now.
Great points. Yeah, I'll jump in. What all three of you just recently brought to my attention was, and it's something for for people to look into and know the brain states, right? So a lot of the stuff and the tenets that we talked about, we're talking about music, watching TV, social media is a huge one. Scrolling on social media, you're in the theta brain state. And yeah, there's positive, effects from that, creativity, meditation, relaxation, but you're also highly suggestible. And, mind control and the subconscious is operating heavily in theta where it's like receiving. So, this is why the ads pop up on social media, why people are scrolling and they just consume and just buying shit and then wonder, why did I buy that? You're in the theta brain state versus something like beta, which is critical thinking and analytical thought. So, studying the frequencies and the states for the brain, I think there's a lot of good value there. Something that I do personally that I've applied actually for many, many years, and I like what Marvin said was, take time before you speak. Take time, hold information in. And I'll give you a story because I ran into an older gentleman at a job just recently, like 3 or 4 days ago, and we got into a philosophical conversation. This man, it was so impressive. I was like blown away. He paused for, I think, about 10, 15 seconds. And you could see him, like I'd ask a question or I would say a statement, and he would just stare at me. And you could tell he was thinking, and then he responded. And I was like, whoa, that was really mind blowing. I mean, I practiced that, but not that long and not that intently. But I think that is extremely powerful, right? Stop, drop, and think. And that will put you in a beta state, brain state as well, because now you're thinking about the information coming in. You're thinking about what you're going to say. Self-regulating emotions, journaling is really good. Observe your daily habits from morning all the way to evening, to bed. Even dream journaling as well. But what you're doing is you're shining the conscious mind onto your patterns. So it doesn't matter. It's just your journal. No one's going to see shit, right? So all the negative stuff, all the positive stuff, mainly reactions, how it made you feel, how you reacted to certain situations. And you do that over time, and you're going to get extreme value. And just as an intention becomes a behavior, right? Behavior becomes habit. And through practice, it becomes second nature. right? So you're going to do this naturally. You're going to be able to increase your pattern recognition and your awareness of your internal ecology and how you operate. And once you understand how you operate on a fundamental level, right? Mainly filtration, information coming in, you're filtering it with the knowledge of natural law, objective morality. These are first principles. So every bit of information or situation that you are experiencing or taking in gets filtered through first principles. Is it true? Is it moral? Is it useful? These are questions that you can ask yourself. And if it doesn't check off any of those questions, it's complete, just, negative empirical knowledge, not useful, you know? So you throw it out the window or do whatever, hold it for a little bit. But I mean, those are some of the techniques that I like to do. So
Simplify the profound. Thanks, Will. I think too, I just wanted to point out, all these wonderful people that have joined me tonight: Chris, Marvin, Brandon, Leslie, and Will, on super short notice. I didn't even have the idea for this show yesterday. And it just really shows as a tribute to the minds and the thinking practice that you folks have done to be able to. I just threw out a topic: misaligned worldviews, and you can just come on and speak succinctly and clearly on that topic. And I think, that's kind of an advertisement out there for our other people listening. You got to practice to get like that. These guys have been putting in the work, and that's how they're able to present the way they are today. So thanks a lot, guys, for coming. Any
I
last?
had more.
Yeah, go ahead, Leslie. Yeah,
Okay. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
no problem.
I wanted to. CB's question is a good one, right? Around how do we manage or regulate our emotions? And I liked what Marvin said about, we don't want to suppress our emotions. The goal isn't to shove them down. We need to feel. And so we want to become an observer or a witness to our emotions and to our automatic thoughts. And one way to cultivate this is through a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice, to do mindfulness daily, to be mindful of your body state and of what's happening internally. And this will bring attention to internal contradictions, polarized thoughts. You may notice that you have a real, critic going on in your mind. And you might notice that you have a part of you that just feels powerless. So when you start to develop this awareness, then you can start to dialogue internally from that witness place, which means that you have your frontal lobes online and they're connected in. They're able to communicate to the limbic system and the brainstem, which is guiding the physiological responses. So
In alignment,
the alignment, right? And so when you are in this state, you can cultivate a curiosity, and you can start to ask questions of yourself, of between yourself and these parts, to understand more about yourself and what's driving you. And through this process, you also will build what's called somatic capacity, which is the ability to tolerate distress. Because when we're triggered, especially a trauma trigger, it happens often unconsciously, it happens really fast. And if we don't have our distractions, we're often can be uncomfortable. And it's about sitting with the discomfort and not quickly doing the automatic feel good activities that you want to do, to suppress or shut down something uncomfortable. And the more that you're able to just like tune in like this, you can see all sorts of things that you don't normally notice. And it's really like one of you were saying about slowing down. Will, I think you're talking about this slowing down and observing and creating a little more of a gap between, this automatic thought and your action, but to actually do some process of self-evaluation of what's happening before you speak, before you act, before you pick up that drink or whatever it is that, is working on you, that's handling you instead of you handling it. And the last thing I'll say is I think setting really small goals, like micro steps. So if you kind of have a sense of where you're going, then you need to wind back and you need to ask yourself consciously, is this thought, is this action in alignment with that goal, that vision, that North Star? And is it taking me, is it alignment with morality? And so you're consciously taking each step. Obviously sometimes we just want to be spontaneous and fun and all that, right? I'm not talking about being super uptight and nerdy every second, but definitely people don't do this enough. So we need to add that into our self as really, so we always have a certain awareness to catch ourselves from doing something. Because if we don't, you know what happens? Bad shit happens. Accidents happen. People get hurt. You do things you regret, so anything, anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Who's next?
I think to what y'all has said, we have to get back to using our senses to verify things. And yes, that is correct. The senses are there for us to take in information in reality so we can correctly, make discernment and logical, reasonable, decision. And that's what we have to get back to. Hell, imagine saying something and then someone telling you, "Oh, you didn't see that," or imagine hearing something and someone telling you, "Oh, you didn't hear that," and then the person being told that just goes along with that. We have to get back to an understanding of not just ourselves, but the objective reality. That way we can align, both of those, because to align yourself with objective reality is what it means to align yourself with, objective truth. So the senses are the best way for us to do that. And that's a good way for you to be in the present moment, so if you're in a situation and there is a lot of things going on, then you have to be able to use discernment, because yes, there can be an overstimulation, yes, there can be a lot of information that can be a bombardment or an overflowing of those senses. But it's up to you to learn how to manage and handle and deal with that, and not shy away and run away and suppress those things. So just you know something for you to think about, because the sensors are there for a reason, and we have to get back to using them, because a lot of people like just want to put a piece of technology in front of them and not use their senses to verify things. They want to put what those glasses on them, the whole virtual reality, and not verify things, with the false reality, the proxy reality. So, we have to get back to the correct version, the accurate understanding of ourselves and reality, and the senses are the correct way of us doing that.
I love it. Yep.
I'll just add that like everything people have been mentioning is related to the trivium. So input, senses, reflection, emotional states, processing, putting that gap between the stimulus and the response. And the trivium is an important tool to help us in our evaluation of reality and ourselves, in order to um, persist in the behavior we're already engaging in, or modify ourselves and choose a different path to walk down. But just because you engage in the trivium process doesn't mean you're going to arrive at truth. It's a methodology to help you figure out what's true. But just because you engage in some input, do some processing, and maybe some output, doesn't mean that what you've attained is the truth. So there's some caveats in that to be wary of when we engage in this process. And one of the biggest barriers is ourselves. One of the things that I've said a lot in some of my earlier work and articles is you are your own worst enemy, and you judge, offend, and insult yourself by your own actions. And one of the tools that can be useful to not deceive yourself is, of course, as Chris mentioned, logical fallacies. There's cognitive biases. One of them I mentioned was the bandwagon effect. learning these things, but also what I've termed objective detachment. So you have to learn to detach from yourself, because everything that you're going to take in as input from your senses, you're going to automatically relate it to your sense of self, your self view, and your worldview. So that's going to be automatically associated with what I also call the ego personality identity construct. So since the moment you're born, all the input into your senses and the stimulus that goes into your consciousness that helps to shape who you are, especially the first like 7 formative years. And so your sense of self develops, after a year old. There's the ego development, and then there's the conflict of the ego you and then the other egos, and learning to cooperate and share and things like that as children grow up. And so the ego and your personality develops and your identity, and then we become attached to things. All these things like traditions and culture, all these birthdays, and all these other festivals and holidays, and all these things we become attached to because we take them in and they become part of how we view ourselves and the identity we become attached to. And so my point is that objective detachment is an important tool to use to make sure that you're not blinding yourself to aspects of reality or to truths that you can reflect upon just because they might contradict something that you're attached to, that you view as part of yourself. And that's the things that we become most defensive on as well. Whenever there's truth that's presented but we're so attached to falsity, then that's one of the main problems is we have in my like 4 top problems. There's consciousness, because we can be great good or great evil, and there's the problem of belief, and then there's the attachment to belief, and then there's the pleasure trap. So we become attached to pleasure, we become attached to our ego personality identity constructs. So the attachment is attachment to desire, or attachment to expectations is a large cause for suffering. So when we're attached to ourselves and how we think we are, or that it must be this way, and we're rigid and fixed, calcified in our ego, then that can be a barrier to being able to reflect upon ourselves and reflect upon what is actually true, and the information coming in from our senses, such as what we read or hear, and our own ourselves can become a barrier that prevents us from evolving and improving our own lives.
Absolutely, man. Someone should transcribe
Fantastic.
this episode. It could be better than all the self help books you see out there on the aisle for sure. Was there something last you were going to say there, Will, or anybody else have something on the tip of their tongue before I close up?
I was just nodding. I think everyone just expressed fantastic points, man. Excellent conversation. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Yeah, you
Chris,
guys are awesome.
I know I mentioned the last time we talked on the phone that it's always cool how like we have different flavors of the same thing, which I guess just speaks to the truth of it. So like how I might summarize the last of everything we just talked about. I sent it in the chat, but it's the you who chooses what to do is the true you, because before anything there's a choice that's made. So
Yeah, that's the initiative and the will. And so let's go forward this week. Be conscious, folks, of what decisions you're making. How do you feel in your body? Are you the emotion, or are you just recognizing the emotion? Because I think that's a good exercise to start off with. How am I feeling? Where does my body feel it? And when you recognize those things, you realize that those things aren't you. They're things that you're able to recognize as being. Look at that tail on Leslie's. Well, I think that's the show call. Thanks so much for coming, everybody. I appreciate your attendance. I think I'm going to send us out here with a little clip. I know Will has going to recognize this one. I played it one time in one of my presentations before. I called it "Be a Good Man or Not."
Mhm.
Let's check this one out.
Thank you, guys. It was really fun.
Yeah, good night, all.
Really
Appreciate
listening,
it,
watching.
y'all. Thank
Much
you.
love.
Thanks for having me, and thanks
All
for
right.
coming.
Love you guys, all of you.
All
Love y'all
right.
too. Love you.
I'm
Goodbye.
back soon.
Take care, y'all. Appreciate
All
Thank
right.
you.
you.
Right on.
At any
Here we
rate,
go.
it seems I've lost my religion. I put no stock in religion.
Is it playing?
Yes.
It seems
Cool.
Yep.
I've lost my religion. I put no stock in religion. By the word religion, I've seen the lunacy of fanatics of every denomination be called the will of God. Holiness is in right action and courage on behalf of those who cannot defend themselves. And goodness. What God desires is here and here. And what you decide to do every day, you will be a good man. Or not. Come.
What is the world coming to? With so few paying attention to the rate of dissension, labeling with a lack of retention. Words are the cure for the ill of disease, and this poetess wears truth on her sleeve, giving birth to manuscripts that bleed, that breathe, that tease, that say please. Are you listening to the poet's need to disseminate verbal industry with poetic harmony? I used to wait for answers. Now I answer my own questions with suggestions, conceiving conceptions from internal perception. Remembering who I am goddess inside of human being, seeing in a different light, sort of like insight, blessed and dressed even statuesque in nature, a trailblazer destroying any disclaimer, proclaiming self-liberation from the plantation foundation. I want to build monuments from scratch, blasting this crazy pain off my back, cause I never predicted that we'd be so addicted, afflicted, and restricted by fear. Like a foregone conclusion, reality's become that intrusion, illusion we're losing, breeding confusion. Inhaling prescriptions with lengthy descriptions, beating the weak into submission and ignoring resistance. Cause the circumstance is enhanced by these powerful ants that plant the words I can't into the psyche, leaving pain to flourish like debris from the unfree. I want to christen absurd words by accident, subsequently flavoring this mystical diction with non-fiction chapters like broadcaster bringing